All right, I'm Brian Hickson, Neuroscience Director for the Brain Performance Center. And today we are talking about your kid's brain on video games. So this is an interesting subject that a lot of people have a lot of interest in. There's a lot of kind of conflicting science that's coming out on this. And, it's difficult because when you raise kids, this is such a prevalent thing now, especially for boys, but really for girls too. It's getting to be more and more. And when we talk about kids, we're really talking about people into the average video gamer age is around 30 years old. So we're talking about people all the way into their 40s as well. So, all right, let's get started here. So what I'm going to do is talk first about kind of the benefits of video gaming. A lot of people are very negative about video gaming, but there are definitely some huge benefits. We're going to talk about those here. So video games are a cognitive stimulating activity. These are things that you have to react to. You have to look for minute details, see things where there's differences between here and here, and react to those things. A lot of them have a lot of problem solving skills, which we'll talk about in a minute too. But this is a very cognitive stimulating idea. So a very cognitive stimulating activity, very much in the same way a puzzle would be, very much in the same way a board game would be. And in some ways, even how sports are, and a lot of the video games are sports where you're actually playing sports through video games and you're understanding the whole skill set that's going on behind that. So it's definitely a cognitive stimulating activity, which are some good things for the brain. It definitely improves some, we're going to talk about here in a minute, but definitely there's been large studies that show that it improves focus and visual motor skills ability, especially with hand-eye coordination. So think about the average video gamer is doing up to 200 to 300 activities per minute with their controller. Okay. So this is immense hand-eye coordination that is happening here, being able to control things on the screen from minute little movements on your hands and your fingers. There's a lot of skill sets around that. We're going to talk about here, even in the military and stuff that require that type of feedback sensitivity where you can actually move something here and you're watching something happen out there. So definitely in hand-eye coordination, it's huge improvements. Improves problem solving skills. We kind of mentioned on that up here, but this is definitely, if you think about I just turned 50, and when I was a kid, it was more like, I'd say even later on, it was more like Mario Kart or different things like that. And most of these came with a little manual that said, okay, here's all the things you need to do. Here's where to find them. Here's what to do. And you had to kind of read through and figure it out. There's no manuals that come with these games. These games are intense as far as leveling up. You have to find certain things, problem solve once you see this, then find that. A lot of role-playing games have intense problem solving through it where you have to do it. So it's definitely, it's in some ways kind of like going to a murder mystery type event where you have to figure out who done it. And so there's a lot of problem solving skills that happen with that too, which are great. Can provide some, I want to emphasize some, social interactions. So definitely this is a social outlet for people too. You can be at college, you can be in high school, you can be all over the country, all over the world, and be integrating socially with people. We're going to talk about the limitations of that here in a minute, but it definitely is allowing some people to have some more social interactions too. And then many jobs, like we talked about today, involve gaming skills. In the military, flying drones, all kinds of type of things that we need to be able to see with radar and stuff, all is really right along that video game type skill set. Gaming industry is huge. Social media, everything is gamified, quick action, little bits of information here and there, which is all kind of based around the reward system, video games. Medical, especially medical imaging, as doctors kind of can send a microscopic scope through your blood vessels and look at things. They're controlling it with little controllers. They're very much like video games as they're watching as they go through different things. To engineering, CAD programming. We're building houses. We're testing, if a tornado hit it, wind or earthquakes, all these things are all based on computer systems that simulate those things that have a lot of the same infrastructure as gaming does. So there's a lot of great things about, a lot of benefits about gaming that definitely has to be said before we jump into the next thing. is negative side effects of gaming. So here's where, like anything, there's a negative side and a good side. I think anything has that. And so we don't want to throw out the good side, but we need to be aware of this negative side and how that can start to alter some of the connections in our brain. So the first thing is addiction. Okay, this is very similar to drugs. It's very similar to gambling. Gambling is actually a form of video game addiction. What happens is it actually alters the dopamine reward pathway. Okay, so basically, what should happen is that I should be able to produce enough dopamine to look outside, see a sunset, and say, wow, that's beautiful. A little bit of stimulation, a little bit of color, a little bit of things, and I should get a little bit of reward that says, wow, that's gorgeous. I like looking at that. I like tasting something. I get a reward from when I taste something that tastes good. I'm talking to a friend, talking with my spouse. There's different things that should produce a little bit of dopamine that allows us to have a natural reward in daily life. Well, the problem is that a certain amount of stimulation causes a certain amount of dopamine relief. So that's why what's very important is meditation, because it lowers your stimulation and it helps you to actually have a dopamine release or a little bit of dopamine while you're very still and present, which allows you to start appreciating and enjoying the present. But as you start playing video games over and over, hours and hours per day, that raises the bar at which you start producing dopamine. So instead of producing dopamine on little bits of stimulation, now it's required to have a lot of stimulation. Okay. And what happens is when you have that much stimulation all at once to your brain and so much going on, it has what's called a dopamine dump. So now I can only produce a certain amount of dopamine a day, and I dump it all. I dump it all during that time. That means that I am producing very little amounts of dopamine after that. Okay. That means that nothing comes close. That means I'm thinking about, gosh, I had so much fun chemically in my brain. I had so much fun while I played it. And now I have no fun when I'm not playing it. So then the brain produces very little. It starts building up. And then I play video games again and it dumps it all. So now I get this huge reward from playing video games, and I get no reward from anything other than video games. And that starts to become the pattern in there. And it starts to condition to that, to where we lose interest in everything else. And the only thing we can do to get that reward is play video games. And then we have to level up and get more and more. And even that video game isn't satisfying enough. We have to keep doing more. It's really like chasing a high with a drug, that once you have a certain amount, then it starts needing more and more and more. And so it's very insatiable. And so that's where we have to watch out for, is the addiction side that can happen. And it happens a lot with different things. And again, doesn't mean everybody that plays video games gets this actual dopamine reward pathway alteration, but it can. So we have to watch for that. We have to watch out for overstimulation of fight or flight waves. This is very similar response to what we see in post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay? If you are in a trauma situation for a long time, if you are in a high threat situation for a long time, your brain's fight or flight starts to stay up and condition up. And here's where you'd maybe have a fight or flight reaction. And the problem is that relaxation should be down here. It starts to stay up here. Okay, because you're always a little bit on alert of something that could happen. And the problem with being in especially specific video games, especially ones that are fighting, war, first-person shooter, all these type of things, is you're always in this high alert state. It's a constant bombarding of the brain in this high alert. Anything could happen at any time. And the video games are so kind of lifelike now that the brain actually gets tricked into thinking it's happening. And so you get so into that's why kids that play it are yelling at the computer, yelling at their friends. They're upset. They're doing all these things. They're basically getting about probably 40 to 50% of the intensity of actually being there shooting or being at war or being, in a car racing or any of these type of things. So it's tricking the brain into that. And it starts to alter brainwaves after a while, which starts to affect mood and behavior. Because if I'm living here, I'm pretty agitated. I should be agitated. I should wake up in the morning and be nice, low, idle fight or flight waves. Here's again where I'll have a fight or flight reaction. And if I'm down here, it would take a lot, like someone attacking me, maybe a fire coming towards my house. and it would keep going up until finally it would elicit this fight or flight reaction. So we don't want to wake up in the morning and already be here. Then every little bit of stress triggers our mood, triggers our agitation, triggers our frustration. Those things, again, would be normal if something bad was about to happen. That would probably be fine to be in that situation. But if something wasn't, we shouldn't be in that all the time. So this overstimulation of the fight or flight can happen quite a bit. I'm going to show you here. This is I've changed the name here, but this is an actual client, actual 15-year-old client. I think this was probably, I don't know, 2 summers ago or so that we did this, 22, so last year. And so this was in July, the first part of July, a video gamer, 15. And here is what we had. Now, this kid played video games all the time and hours per day, and was having some issues with addiction, was having some issues with attitude, behavior, overreacting to things, all these type of things that are happening. They're normal with frustration, agitation, and fight or flight, more rage, faster reaction speed, reduced memory, all these things, adrenaline, anxiety. And you can see it all through here. This is the sensory processing area of the brain. And these, again, are the fight or flight waves, high beta fight or flight waves. So this at rest, this kid's brain at rest started out all the way up in this red, which is 3 standard deviations too high. Now, this is compared to his age and gender. So this is compared to a 15-year-old boy. His sensory processing area, the alert side of the brain, is already starting out at rest 99.9% higher than it should. Okay. So that gives you a very little amount of reserve before fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight. Again, we should be down here, giving us a huge amounts of reserve. And so this kid, his mom was going to have him trained with neurofeedback. But she said, should I wait? Because he's going to be going to Hawaii. He's going to be going to work at his, I think his uncle's surf shop for the summer. And, if he's going to be gone for almost 2 months, like 6 weeks or so. And I said, well, no, that's amazing, because he's not going to play video games when he's there. He's not taking his console or anything. So he's going to go, he's basically getting a 6-week break from video games, outside surfing, working, interacting with people, exercising in Hawaii. And so what we did is we said, yeah, let's hold off for sure doing anything now. And when he comes back, I said, let me do another brain map. And because I would love to see, we've done this a number of times now, to where we see, when someone has that big of a break, usually kids don't take a 6-week break of video games. So it's kind of a unique situation when they play a lot. So here's where he started, again, on July 6th. And then here, as of 8/29, right when he got back, what his brain looked like. Look at this. All this 3 standard deviations, even the 2.5 standard deviations, is all gone. It has a little speck is all right there. That gold is just a half a standard deviation outside of normal. Okay, that's a huge, huge improvement. That's down to probably about 50% higher than what it should be, versus 99% higher to where it should be. So it's still a little bit of stress on the brain, but usually someone can handle this. And this kid was a different kid when he came back too, as far as helping out his mom, doing things. His mom works from home, doing some things too, and he would help out, wanted work and wanted a job more. Was playing a lot less video games, was a lot less reactive towards things. It completely changed kind of his personality. I wouldn't say his personality, but it took out the agitation, frustration out of it, and really gave her back her kid's normal personality, the good part of the personality that's not frustrated and agitated and always on edge. And so this is, this is not any neurofeedback training. This is not anything at all. No change of diet, no change of anything except for being off video games and being outside. So I always tell people, if they, we can do this, we do this all day long with neurofeedback, training this down. But if you don't want to do neurofeedback, send your kid for 6 weeks to Hawaii and have them work and be outside. That's the other alternative that works great, and they'd probably love it more. I wish we could all do that more over the summer, just get our brains a break from all the computer and the blue light and all the stimulation that we have, be out in nature. So this was a big testament to how it changes that sensory side. This, again, was conditioned way up, and then it allowed that release and coming down after conditioning down over time. Again, we can do this with neurofeedback, so don't worry, you don't have to send your kid to Hawaii for 6 weeks. But you can train that down as well. So again, overstimulation affects mood and behavior. typically separates verbal communication from nonverbal communication. This is a very, very important one because every kid will always say that, hey, this is my social interactions. This is how I socialize with people. I can stay in touch with friends and stuff, which is great. There is definitely a component of that. However, you have to understand how the brain works. The right side, the right frontal portion of my brain pays attention in a conversation to all the nonverbal cues. Is this person caring about what I say? Are they smiling? Are they mad at me? Their tone of voice that's happening, their different interactions and stuff. There's so many nonverbal cues that right side picks up. The left side picks up the actual literal words that they say and gets my words to say back to them. Okay. Now, both of those come into one conversation. We can't split them apart. There's no way to do that. It's one conversation. Typically, people that have overactivity of this side, too much at a resting state, then they overreact to nonverbal cues. So that would be someone that little bit of tone of voice, doesn't matter what you just said, they can't even listen anymore and they feel offended. Or, barely look down at something and they think you're not paying attention to them. It's someone that's over in tune to the nonverbal. And then someone that would be too much in tune to the left side wouldn't even pay attention to the social cues. They start just caring more about the literal words, not necessarily how it's said. And there's problems with both of those. But the problem with this is when you separate the verbal from the nonverbal, which you do our video games, you're still getting some tone of voice and stuff, which is, considered nonverbal, even though it's part of verbal, but still it's not the actual words. And so, you're still getting a little bit of that, but you're losing all the interaction we get from being face-to-face to someone. Okay. And that is so important. And this is why typically you will see kids on video games. And this is why even with texting, this is social media. We will say Twitter, people will say things that are horrible that you would never, ever say to someone's face because you would never want to see their reaction to what you just said. Okay. And we learn now to separate those two so we can tweet something, we can put something on social media that's right in someone's face without any love, any grace, anything about that. How we deliver a message is so important, probably as important as the message itself is how we deliver that. And we learn that. And we learn that when we have face-to-face conversations, when we say something to someone and it hurts them. Okay. That's empathy. Okay. And what happens when you separate these things is you start losing empathy. And when you lose empathy for someone, now you don't care how it affects them. You just say things. It's on my mind. I just say it. Okay. And that causes a major, major problem in society. We see that all day long now, all over social media. People are just bombarding things out. They're really just kind of throwing up over people. And even sometimes those messages could be true, but if they're not delivered the right way, it causes a major problem in relationships. And so this is a real problem when we start doing all communication by text, social media, by just talking to someone, and then the problem is also that you become almost a different character in a video game. You become the character you're playing. And so you're kind of role playing. And so now you might be just saying things to people or putting people down because it might be more the character in the role of it. If you were truly in a battle shooting someone, trying to kill some bad guy coming along, trying to kill you, you're probably not too concerned about how nice you are to that person, right? So you kind of take on that role when you're doing that. But the problem is that teaches our brain how to interact with people. It teaches our brain not to, kind of deliver things out of love and respect for people, but just whatever's on your mind, you should say it, which is not the case. And so that's a very important one here, that breakdown in communication. And then we have content. Now, a lot of people would argue on this, and you can think how you want. It's my podcast or my webinar. I get to say my thoughts on this. But again, this is just coming from my personal opinion. But a lot of the content, the problem is it desensitizes danger, crime, killing. A lot of these games are about living on the edge of danger, things that would normally not be safe for us. It's living on, in the face of crime. It kind of glorifies crime a lot. It glorifies killing a lot. And a lot of people would say this is just a game. It's just a game. It's not real. There is a breakdown that happens in the brain when you stop associating crime from the disaster that happens to that person, the family, the loved ones, and everything of that person. When we start disassociating those two together or apart from each other, there is a lack of empathy that occurs. There's more dangerous living, more high threat living, which teenagers already have because their cortex isn't fully formed. A desensitization towards killing. I definitely am not probably one that thinks that every video game of first-person shooters is what's causing all these first-person or all these school shootings. However, I think it does lead. It takes someone that's already has mental problems, is already on the edge and everything, and it can desensitize them more than others. So it's not like it just evenly blanket, hits this with everybody and causes everybody to be school shooters, but it can take someone that's already on the edge and push them to desensitize, to kind of glorify what can happen here, the amount of kills you have. So we have to be real careful of this. Again, this is kind of a moral thing that I think people need to be concerned about as we look at these things. The other thing is loss of brain balance. And what I mean by that is that balance with other activities. Again, video games can be good, but I always give the example, playing video games all the time is kind of like going to the gym and saying, I only want to work out on this one muscle, just this one muscle, don't work out anything else. And if every other part of your body is weak and this one muscle is strong, it makes you uncoordinated. Okay, it makes you, favor that one muscle over and over, but it doesn't allow the balance of muscles throughout the body, which is what true health is. So just because you can have high problem-solving skills, you can have fast reaction time, fast motor control, sometimes those things, when they're not tempered through things like empathy, through things like love, respect for people, and understanding the dangers of things. So if they're not tempered by that side, it gets out of balance. And then you have a problem that occurs. So we need to keep these things in balance. I talk to a lot of people that when their kids play so much video games, I tell them, one thing that's just a great general rule is to try and balance. For every hour they play, on video games, have an hour outside, have an hour with friends, have an hour, with, even gardening, making something in the kitchen, doing some other activity, sports, any of those type of things. We need that live social interaction to balance this. We need exercise to balance this, not to mention sitting in a chair all day long in front of a video game for hours and hours, what it does to your spine and the whole mechanical side of the body. Again, we're just talking about the brain here, but it's important to exercise and to counter. We have to counterbalance this video gaming, and you can do okay. So again, social interactions, being outdoors, cooperation with others. A lot of people think cooperation with others. Are you kidding? I'm on a team in Call of Duty and we're doing this stuff together. It's not really cooperation with others. It's a little bit different tactic. It's more tactile type things, or it's working as a team as with a certain thing, but it's very individual still. To have cooperation with others on a sports team where you have a coach and you have authority and you have to have discipline and you have all these things that work with that. That's really what we need, especially as our cortex is growing as we're a teenager. The last thing that I really want to talk about is that how this messes up sleep cycles. Sleep cycles, even if it's not causing addiction, even if it's not causing a change in mood or anything, so many kids are playing this so late into the night that it messes up the sleep cycles. And again, that is the only time your brain is cleansing itself, is in those deepest sleep cycles. So when you're not getting enough time in that deep sleep cycle, you are not cleansing out. The detoxification portion of the brain is every 90 minutes in deep sleep, non-REM deep sleep. And if you're not getting enough time in that, you're not cleansing out your brain. And that would be like your whole lymphatic system not working. Okay. That causes problems. That leaves toxins, plaques, metabolic waste in the brain. It kicks out the omega-3s, the conduction part of the brain that conducts electricity back and forth and allows the brain to work well. So when we go without good quality sleep, and especially that non-REM deep sleep, we're not getting recovery from sleep. So we could sleep 10 hours and not feel recovered. And then our mood changes. We have a buildup of these toxins in our brain, which limits a lot of the neurotransmitters. It's hard to pay attention, causes a lot of focus issues, attention issues. It causes agitation, frustration, mood changes, fatigue that we're fighting against. All these things. So sleep cycles are so important, and we got to make sure we get that. This is one quick little image that shows in that every 90 minutes deep stage of sleep is when the blood vessels in the brain actually shrink down and the cerebral spinal fluid pours through the brain and cleanses the brain from all the toxins, metabolic waste, and the plaques. Okay, so every 90 minutes, your brain almost gets a car wash. It floods through the brain, attaches to all those, and cleanses it out. Okay, and then recirculates back up the cerebral spinal fluid. The cerebral spinal fluid usually sits between your brain and your skull and cushions it. But again, it flushes through every 90 minutes, and that's what cleans out your brain. So when you don't get enough deep sleep, you're not getting that cleansing out. Okay, so how do we help our children? What do we do? So one of the biggest things I love to do is to show a kid their brain. Now, here's the thing. This does not affect every kid's brain the same. Certain kids can play video games and not have any problem because it's not conditioning that response up. Maybe they have pretty good balance in their life and things too. But when your kid, usually you're seeing all the irritability, the frustration, the explosive tempers and stuff, it's usually going to be like this, where you can see this. Now, even this kid here, once he saw this and saw, wow, that's 99.9% too high. That red sticking there in my brain is far up, way above where it should be. That's actually hurting and stressing my brain. Once they see that, it changes things. It changes it from just this mom and dad telling me I, shouldn't play video games. It's not good for me. Just like everything else in the world isn't good for me from a kid's standpoint. And it changes it more to objective, to where, wow, this is actually affecting my brain. I can see it. And I'll tell you what, it helps to have, a neuroscientist point out, like, this is what's doing to your brain. I have 10, 12, 13, 14-year-old kids come in all the time. And when I go over this with them, they're like, wow, oh, wow, Mom, I think I need to probably limit some of this. And how can I counter that to do all this? And the mom's like, I've been telling you this for 5 years. Why haven't you listened to me? And, it's the same thing. Kids won't listen to their parents sometimes, but, to go over this on their brain and they see it visually, it's objective, it's science, I can see it, really helps for them to understand that, okay, this actually is changing my brain. I can feel it now, and I can see how it's changing my sleep, but I can see how it's actually changing my brain. So to really, get a quick brain map and just, forget even neurofeedback, just a quick brain map can help a kid say, oh, yeah, I probably need to limit this a little bit. And they're so much more compliant to different plans to balance that out. The next thing would be to create kind of a balanced brain plan. My kids both play video games, and, both, especially my youngest, was playing a lot. And we had to sit down when he wanted to, play even more and say, okay, well, if you're, so good at this, which he was made a lot of money from it, played in huge tournaments for $200,000 at times. At the Anaheim Convention Center, he was extremely good. But what we did is we sat down and made a balanced brain plan where we said, okay, if you're going to do this, then you're going to do this to counter it. Okay, this is, helpful, but too much can start hurting you. So let's do this and then counter those negative things with this. Some of those things are exercise. Some of those things are being outside. Some of those things are being with other people and not just only interactions and conversations on a video game. Some of those things for us were even things like, exercise, including even stretches and yoga and different things that, actually changes mechanically. If you're sitting in a chair for that long, that can actually stretch out and allow that to not cause a problem. But a balanced brain plan really says, okay, if you're going to activate here, you've got to do some things here to calm the brain. You have to practice. Think of video games very much like someone that says, I just want to work out my muscle. And they just work it out. Well, when you keep working out your muscle without stretching your muscle, it does start to get stronger. However, your motion, your range of motion starts to be limited. There's a lot of negative things. You need to, the more you're using a muscle, the more you need to stretch out that muscle to relax it and to have both full range of motion. And we want our kids' range of motion in their brains to be up and down. They can activate, but they can deactivate. They can come down here, they can do here. Then they'll do very well through life. So some of these things would be, definitely limit time gaming. Don't let it go overboard. What we can do too is set your Wi-Fi on timing. There's a lot of parents that say, gosh, I tell my kid to come for dinner and they just explode. Mom, I'm right in the middle of a game. I just started a game. Are you kidding? I can't come right now. And it becomes a battle now every single time, where sometimes what you have to do is go, tell your kid, yeah, you can take a printout and post it on their door that the Wi-Fi turns off between 6 and 8 o'clock when you have dinner. Okay. And they will know that. Now, the first time the Wi-Fi turns off, the nice thing about the computer doing it, turning it off automatically, is you're not the bad person. You're a little bit the bad person at first because they come running out. I was right in the middle of a game and it just shut off. You don't understand what we were playing a tournament. I've heard all this. Okay. And, but you say, hey, it was posted. You already knew that. Why did you start a game when you knew? I didn't turn it off? I wouldn't have turned it off in the middle, but it's set to do that, to limit it. So, I wouldn't start a game after 5:30 if it's going to take, more than a half an hour to start. And they will be mad for the first 1, 2, or 3 days. And then it's amazing when it's consistent, because consistency is what matters. And when your kid sees that it's very consistent, they will start saying, hey, buddy, I can't start a game. It's like 5:30. No, it's going to turn off right in the middle of it. Okay. And what's cool about that is they are taking now the behavior themselves. They're not blaming you every time it's happening. They're starting to realize, because we can't be as consistent. We'll forget sometimes and not do it and then do it. Where if you set it on your Wi-Fi for a gap or a certain time, it doesn't go over. Most of them can't play these games, these big games, at least on their phone. If it's on their phone, you got to do some other stuff. But limit gaming on the Wi-Fi is good. Balance game with calming activities. Again, flex versus stretch. We talked about that. So things like meditation, deep breathing. My kid had to do neurofeedback, during certain times of the week to offset, to practice calming his brain into a present state so that when he goes into the video game, he was able to play here at a high level, but then he can still calm down his brain. And there's actually some advantages. We've actually trained the Red Bull high performance video game team, a lot of different professional gamers we can train, because when you do train that state and you have that flexibility, you're actually better at video games. It actually widens your vision. Your vision, when you get stressed, shrinks down and it narrows. And on first-person shooter games and things that are happening all through the screen, you're really only paying attention to this center portion of the screen. Where when you actually train your brain to relax during that, you can still pay attention here, but it opens up your peripheral vision and you can respond to things happening over here on the screen. So it actually makes you a better video gamer. Getting things like sports, for my 16-year-old, when he got a job, it was, not to promote necessarily Chick-fil-A, but it was one of the best things that happened to him because it's self-limited. He's got a job. He liked making money. He was part of a team there. He felt responsibility and enjoyed the people he worked with, enjoyed his boss. And so it's self-limits. On sports teams, it's self-limits. Different activities, keep your kid involved in activities. Don't let them have a bunch of free time. When they have a bunch of free time, they don't have the cognitive abilities to really limit themselves. So they need these other things to limit themselves. And by all means, protect their sleep cycles. So have them, again, shut off the Wi-Fi at a certain time at night. Do not let it keep going into the night to where it just keeps their sleep cycles off for a prolonged period of time. If there's, a week vacation or something and they do it, that's not going to kill them. But when it starts doing it all the time and their sleep cycles start getting way off, it causes a real problem. So, all right, I think that is it. And that's what I think we want to talk to. Oh, I did put a slide here. Again, what we can do with neurofeedback is just like this area, we can place a sensor on that area. And it's pretty cool because we can actually put that through kind of what I call like a light video game that will only advance or go forward when you relax that area. So it does actually the exact opposite of video games. You put a sensor on that red area, it detects it right there. We can put it through a system where it checks your brain waves and watches how much you're producing. And every time you're producing more of those fight or flight waves, the game stops, or watching a YouTube video stops. And every time you produce less and it relaxes, it goes and the video game goes. And so it's pretty cool how you can actually use the same type of technology, but you give it at the right time as a reward when the brain relaxes. So this is what I said, I did with my son. I was able to use neurofeedback to offset those areas. So as he's practicing activating them with video games, then with neurofeedback, he practices relaxing them the other side, and you get this nice balance on each side. So that's something that's available as well. And so if you have any questions for us, you can definitely look up our website, brainperformance.com, and on brainperformance.com/webinar, this webinar will be posted along with all our others that we're doing weekly now. So I think we got that all done in time. If you have any questions, please call our office, email us, or you can go rewatch this or post this or send that link to anybody too by going on to brainperformance.com/webinar. All right. Thank you.